like to bring the meeting to order for the Planning Commission for Thursday, April 11th, 2024. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started this morning, I'd like to take a couple minutes and talk about Chris Drummond. I think everyone in this room knows that we lost our lawyer over the past month. He had a massive heart attack and passed away. Chris was, beyond a doubt, one of the most knowledgeable people in planning and zoning. He was a friend, he was a colleague, but more than that, he was our anchor. And I'd like to take a moment of silence and then have Amy say a couple words for the staff. Amy.
So thank you. I think I could speak for a very long time about how valuable Chris has been to all of us, but I also think I can't do that. What I would just like to say is, on behalf of staff, personally, I just want to publicly thank Chris Drummond for all that he has given to us over the decades. Not just great guidance, not just mentorship and support when we need it, and correction when we need it, but I just want to thank him for his good cheer and his friendship, that he was very generous in giving to all of us, and he will be greatly missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay. Meeting minutes review. Oh, I'm sorry, public comments. And this will be about anything other than what we are here, what our hearings are on today. Is there any public comments? There being none. Okay, meeting minutes review.
Madam Chair, I move that the meeting minutes on February 8, 2024 be accepted as written, as submitted.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Kathy? Aye. Okay. Yep. Extension requests, none. So let's go to updates. Legislative and legal matters.
Stephanie Jones, Long Range Principal Planner. I do have a few updates on the previous text amendments that you made recommendations on in February. 2401, which is the text amendment, was in regards to structures on piers. This text amendment went to the county commissioners. They sent a favorable recommendation, or a concept approval, to the Critical Area Commission. The Critical Area Commission approved that text amendment, and the county commissioners will be holding their public hearing. So because this is a critical area text amendment, it has that additional step of going to the Critical Area Commission. The camping co-op, which is 2402, that went to the commissioners the March 12th. They held a public hearing. On the 26th, it was approved, and then it will become effective May 11th. And then I assume we'll start to see some of those issues in the campground be addressed for floodplain. 2403 pier extensions, now to be a variance. That was also approved on the 26th. It will become effective May 11th, but the commissioners did include an amendment to allow for any existing applications that were already in to continue as a conditional use and not have to go to a variance. So that was one thing that had changed since you all had seen it. And then 2404, which was the cannabis bill, that went to the commissioners. A public hearing was held on the 12th, and also they did take a vote that night. It was an emergency legislation, and it is effective now, so it came effective on March 12th. I think the state is starting to roll out their approvals, so we'll begin to see probably some motion, I imagine, in the near future in our office. Yeah, I think that's it for text amendments.
Good morning, Amy Mordock, Planning Director. I have just 3 updates. One, the accessory dwelling unit task force, on which I sit as a rural representative for MACO, will be wrapping up. Our April meeting is dedicated to assessing all of the information that has been gathered and making recommendations that will then be crafted by Secretary of Planning Flora, who will convey our recommendations to the governor. We are really focused on ensuring that all jurisdictions have accessory dwelling unit provisions in their code. We do. Queen Anne's County has accessory dwelling unit provisions. They're permitted in most districts, and there are means to accommodate aging in place and mother-in-law apartments. So our code addresses it. Not every code does. So what we're looking to do is make sure that there's an equitable way across the state that accessory dwelling units provide an affordable housing option, which is one of the governor's key initiatives. On that same line, Heather Tonelli, our Economic and Tourism Director, organized a tour for the Secretary of Housing and Community Development, Secretary Jake Day, of Queen Anne's County, and that took place on the 26th of March. She organized a lot of great stops that showcase all of the hard work that Queen Anne's County has done to implement housing grants and housing programs. She was supported in that effort by Beth Molaski, who is our community relations supervisor. I assisted her, and so did Mike Clark, who is our executive director of the county's housing program. We took a bus tour of state officials around to many sites. We met with private developers and public investors. It was a very successful trip, and in the end, we held a panel discussion of the programs that are in place, and we were told by Secretary Day and his staff that it would appear that Queen Anne's County is leading the charge in terms of housing programs and implementing affordable housing options. As I mentioned, we have long held standards that have supported affordable housing options. Our inclusionary housing standards, which is our MPDU program, our moderately priced dwelling unit program, that coordination between this board and the housing department has really provided some substantial options and a substantial program. I've long told Mike Clark that what he was doing was remarkable, and I think he now realizes that. So that informing of our comp plan through their 2022, I think it was, housing inventory and their housing study, that relationship that we continue to build is really going to help us to address a lot of the initiatives that have been brought forward in the governor's bill. So that's something that this planning commission can be very proud of and was acknowledged by the secretary. On a staffing level, I just wanted to let you know that I had mentioned that we were moving into the future with an online building permit application portal, and our work group, who has been attending training and working on that online platform called the Citizen Self-Service Portal, that's moving along in a very positive direction, and we do believe that citizens will be able to apply for building permits, that consultants will be able to submit applications online this summer, which is a little ahead of schedule. I don't think I'm going to eat my words. I do think it is going to happen this summer. Could be late summer, but we are on schedule, if not a little ahead of schedule. Once the building permits, which is the heaviest lift, we receive thousands of building permits every year. Once that process is smoothed out, I'm sure there'll be a few bumps while we initially implement it. Once we work out all the kinks, the next step will be processing licenses online, whether they're liquor licenses, electrical and plumbing licenses. That will be next, and planning applications will be last. And the reason for that is the size and scope of the submittals that we receive require additional actual hardware and software, and all of our consultants also would need to have access to electronic submittal programs, and not all of our consultants that we work with currently do. I think everyone is going in that direction, but eventually all plat submittals will be submitted electronically. Building plans, which are also large sets of plans, will also be submitted electronically. Electronic signatures will become required. Some surveyors already have electronic signatures, and architects as well. And our district court is already working on, they had attempted to participate in a pilot program where they would go all electronic with plat submittals. We didn't do that yet, but everything is going in that direction, so. Yes?
Sure.
When are you gonna make that electronic?
We would love to do that.
I mean, I'm serious.
No, the
Send it to
problem-
my iPad instead of, you know, taking an employee an entire day, I'm sure, to
And
deliver.
10 trees,
Pardon me?
and 10 trees.
Yeah, and then, I was coming to the trees.
We'd
you know,
love to
just-
do that.
Is that down the line further?
Oh, certainly. The real problem to implementing a completely electronic conveyance of your packet is that not every member of every board has access to Wi-Fi or to broadband services. So the problem is not everyone could access the documents from their homes. We have talked about it, but yeah, as soon as we can do that, we certainly will. It's not a terrible strain on the county's resources. We time it with our inspectors who are out in the field in the various neighborhoods already. So the method that we use right now is pretty efficient, pretty cost effective. But yes, we would love to go completely electronic as well. There will be a paperless world someday. I don't know if it'll be within my lifetime, but
What about staff personnel?
we currently have 2 vacancies. One is our senior long-range planner. We are going through the interview process right now. And we also have a vacancy in our zoning inspector staff, and we are currently going through the interviewing process there as well. We conducted interviews and did not find a candidate who really fit the criteria, so we're re-advertising, so you'll probably see that.
Is that for the inspector or
That's
for
for the
the
inspector.
planner? Okay. So we're gonna go to concept plan approval, and we're going to change the agenda a little bit. We're gonna do Jones Farm Lane Solar LLC first. Rob Gunter?
Jones Farm folks, you guys can come up to the table. All those people, and you're the lucky one?
Good morning, everybody. Rob Gunter with the Department of Planning and Zoning. So first up this morning was number 2, but we'll go forward with the Jones Farm Solar Project. The applicant today is proposing to construct a 64 megawatt utility scale solar project in the Ag zoning district. This project's been here a while. They received original concept approval in 2017 and their first conditional use and set of variances for the project in 2018. After 2018, they received a second, third, and fourth renewal of those conditional use and variances, just to keep it from expiring. Today, they are here to request their last local step, which is major site plan approval from the Planning Commission. The project is located in the far northeast portion of Queen Anne's County, just southeast of Millington. Now I can't see. The project is located within
Yes.
our utility scale solar overlay district. For those who aren't familiar, this district was created in 2017, and the district extends out 2 miles on either side of the main transmission lines that run throughout our county. So on this map, the red lines here are the transmission lines, and the gray area is 2 miles on either side. So everything inside this light gray is the overlay district. And you can see that teal star is the general location of the Jones project, which is clearly inside the district. It's tax map 8, parcel 5, lot 1, addressed as 148 Jones Farm Lane. The site totals 601.156 acres. The total limits of disturbance for the project is more than 325 acres, and the area within the fence will be 319 acres. The property is zoned agriculture. There's a portion of the property, a small portion, inside the Sensitive Species Project Review Area, and it is up here in this corner. There are no rare, threatened, or endangered species on site. There are some downstream species that are thought to be susceptible to changes in water quality, so the DNR strongly encourages adherence to BMPs for the sediment and erosion control while the project's being built. The site does contain steep slopes and non-tidal wetlands. There is no disturbance proposed for these areas. The site contains a stream and its associated buffer, and you can see the blue line runs through, that's the stream, but it also extends up into here. Right under my cursor here is 0.18 acres of disturbance, and that's due to the existing farmland that runs through the property. The Ag District permits 20% disturbance of these areas, and in this case, that equals 2.61 acres, so it's clearly under. There's 231 acres of forest existing on the site. There's no disturbance proposed in these areas. Of that, 123 acres are being placed into long-term protection to address forest conservation and condition of the conditional use approval from the Board of Appeals. The property has 2 listings on the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. First is QA 708, which is the farm itself. Next would be QA 223, the Noble House, which is the small circle in the middle. The house no longer exists. In addition to that, there's an area of archaeological significance. The applicant has completed a phase 1 and phase 2 archaeological study. Numerous artifacts were found. It was recommended that the site be preserved in place, which the applicant is going to do. A minimum fenced buffer of 50 feet to be placed around that area with no disturbance inside. And Maryland Historical Trust has concluded the facility has no effect on historic structures or the landscape. So this is a few site plan features. The project will use more than 150,000 panels, 22 inverters and transformers, and it will deliver 64 megawatts of power to the point of interconnection. The site will be entered here in the yellow circle. Moving down from that, the black striped area is the temporary laydown. So the workers will park here and all the deliveries will unload and stage the materials and equipment to be used during construction as needed. Below that, we have the small blue square that is the project's collector substation, which obviously, hence the name, collects the power and will deliver it to the Delmarva Power substation, which is the blue square under it. The collector substation details are not currently on your site plan, and however, in the future, they will be. They'll amend the site plan to include those details. The Delmarva Power substation will be on a separate lot that will be subdivided from the 600-acre parcel. Delmarva Power will own this lot. That subdivision is here and currently under review. In addition to that, the Delmarva Power substation will require a minor site plan, and that's also here under review. Below the substation, this teal blue line is an existing Delmarva Power right-of-way and power lines that run through the property. The right-of-way is 150 feet wide. This red area is the area of archaeological significance I mentioned before, and here you can see how it lays out in the project, and no solar panels are running through the middle of it. The white lines are the internal access roads. Once complete, this is how one will get through and around this site. And all the area in the black in between is the solar panels and other various equipment, the inverters and such. Utility scale solar projects are required to plant a landscape buffer 50 feet wide in areas where sufficient vegetation doesn't already exist. The applicant is proposing landscape buffers along Blanco Road, as well as the southeastern property line where there is no vegetation currently. This buffer includes canopy, understory trees, evergreens, shrubs, and pollinator habitat. And in this case, unlike all of the other solars you've seen, the applicant has already planted. I believe they did so more than a year ago, probably. If you look really hard, you can see the dots on the screen up there. This is along Blanco Road. Those are the evergreens. And this would be the back property line. This open spot here hasn't been planted because that is the Delmarva Power right-of-way. The maximum height of the panels for this project is just shy of 8 feet 3 inches. The equipment on site, not including the collector or the collector substation, the maximum height of that is 9.5 feet, and the black vinyl coated fence that will surround the array will be 7 feet in height. The applicant's provided a site access plan. Deliveries and workers will exit Route 301 at Dudley's Corner Road, travel through Sothersville, ultimately ending at the site entrance, which is along Blanco Road. Leaving the site, they'll just reverse that course. So now we get into some existing conditions, and I will say that I went and took these photos. Kevin Clark was there with me. It was a rainy, cloudy day in early February. So they're not the prettiest, and the plants kind of look dead, but they were not. They're just not leafed out, and my phone takes terrible pictures, apparently. But this is a portion of the landscape buffer on Blanco Road, and this would be the other side of the entrance for the landscape buffer along Blanco Road. This is at the site entrance looking into the property, and you can see there's no tillage happening. The fields are all fallow currently. This will, in the future, be the back side of the substation location. Here we are in the middle of the property, looking east. This is from the same spot looking south. The back of the property, you can see the power lines running through the Delmarva Power right-of-way here. And this is the buffer that is planted along the back. It's a little better picture. You can at least tell the trees are green in this picture. And this is the view from Stalltown Road, looking towards the northwest. Immediately left of this image, if you look at the small inset, you can see there are 2 residential lots. So this is approximately their view. And if you look really hard, you can see the landscape buffer running right here. So with that, that's the last slide I have. I'll answer any questions you may have, or at least attempt to. Otherwise, I can turn it over to the applicant.
Before we go any further, Bill has requested that he recuse himself from this project. and we're okay because we still have a quorum.
Mr. Gunter, I have two questions for you. First of all, you note in your staff report that the MDE Maryland Department Environmental Health has approved a sewage reserve area. That's rather unique for a solar field. Can you address what that?
It's not unique. It's been a requirement that John has allowed some form or fashion to move forward previously. But I think my understanding is the higher-ups called him and required that.
There is no proposed dwelling
There
or
are no
structure of
proposed
any kind, other than the
bathrooms.
substations that you outlined?
There's no proposed water, nothing permanent. You'll see as a condition, I believe it says that if workers are there more than 4 hours, they have to provide portable restrooms and hand washing stations as needed.
So this is sort of something that, a septic reserve area that's traditional a lot, that just in case after this thing is reclaimed perhaps in the future, there's an undisturbed area?
Yes.
Got it.
It's a state requirement.
Got it. And you mentioned a fence being placed around the historical area. Is that of the nature of the vinyl fence, or is it something like a split rail fence? I mean, what sort of fence requirements do we have with respect to that?
It'll just be a vinyl coated fence.
So similar to the perimeter fence?
It's essentially just to keep machinery out. It'll be fenced first, and then it's to keep all the development out.
Got it. Thank you, that's all.
Two questions. One, I assume the topsoil is being managed in accordance with our guidelines.
No topsoil is permitted to be removed from the site.
And secondly, with fond memories of Mr. Drummond, do we have a plan to make sure this vegetation thrives? It's already established, but I know that in some cases where trucking or hauling was involved, it didn't quite seem to keep pace with the needs.
Yep, so solar projects are required to submit a landscape maintenance plan and a bond to assure survival, and it will be inspected. Our inspectors will go out there. I talked to Mr. Waterman while I was there on site. They did have a handful, I forget what you said, that had died and they had already replaced. I only saw one that looked like it may have been dead or dying, but I did not see anything that was blatantly dead. But again, it was February and it was leaf off. So once they get permits, our inspectors will go take a look.
Given the current rainy conditions, I don't think they're going to have trouble keeping up.
I don't think so either. And unlike many of the other solar projects, this one's tucked in. Their buffer is only just over 4 acres, where I believe bluegrass was in the neighborhood of 30.
Yeah.
So significant difference.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Can I get a motion?
Hear from the applicant.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still thrown off thinking about Chris. Can you introduce yourself and
I'm sure they'd love one.
tell us?
Sure, good morning. I'm Nick Leffner with Kimley Horn and Associates. We're the civil engineer for the project. We would be happy to have a motion. I think really we want to answer any questions you guys have. I did want to introduce, we have, members of the applicant team here too that are available to answer any questions that we have. But a lot of thought has gone into, the planning. Obviously, the applicant team has been working for years to develop this project. Rob, I think, gave a great summary. The projects, I think, you couldn't really cite a project much better than this, I think, in the form of the transmission line literally runs through the property that the project's going to be connected into, so it's well within the 2-mile offset of transmission lines. The existing forest, they'll be put into forest conservation. Almost the entire project surrounded by existing forest from the sense of providing screening and buffering. The landscape buffer, it really is just limited to the right-of-way areas. I think the photo, Rob, that you took over from Stolltown Road was great, that you can see the landscape's already grown up, and as far as like a vista view, you really won't be able to see that once it gets just a foot or two higher. All the environmental areas have been beyond buffered, so the minimum 25-foot setbacks have been extended to 35 feet. The archaeological site will just have the standard black vinyl coated fence around it, but there's also gates being provided in the fence, so You can go in and mow, the area can still be maintained. If, something in the future, further, removal of any kind of archaeological features were gonna be investigated, like there's a way to get in. It's not gonna just be kind of fenced off and forgot about. And other than that, we've worked extensively with staff, I think, beyond the initial approval of the project with the final design, with all the departments. And, I hope, I know in the past, you've made reference to the bluegrass site. There's an extensive laydown area provided at the beginning, understanding that one of the questions that sometimes comes up is just making sure that no traffic's backing up onto the roads during deliveries. We've made sure that full-size tractor trailers have no issue getting into the site from like an access road width and turning standpoint. The laydown yards laid out so that, not only can all the construction workers park on site, material areas, there's areas available to store, panels or other equipment as they're coming in and being received by the property. And tractor trailers can fully navigate the entire area too, so it's not like there's a pinch point where, a tractor trailer is gonna have to be stuck backing up a couple times to get out. So we've given a lot of attention for during construction, making sure that nothing's gonna back up or affect the adjacent roads. So other than that, I think really we'd like to ask any questions. I think the staff report's great that, to the landscape piece, though the landscape in this case was put in a little bit early, it was really a time of year piece. A lot of times if you're stuck at like the end of one of the planting seasons, you may run into summertime and then just the survivability goes down a lot. Likewise, if you plant in the spring, a lot of times you can have some die off or survivability issues come the summertime. In this case, because it was planted last year, the fall is really the best time. If, timeline allows to get the plants put in, they can establish with the rainier winter, they're not burned off during the summer heat. So really, there's almost been 2 seasons now to really get good establishment of those landscape areas so that they can continue to thrive. And there'll be a bond put in place, kind of after the approval that we'd work with staff on. Likewise, with the decommissioning, there'd be a bond put in place that we continue to work with staff on, the stormwater agreements. So kind of our hope is, with a positive result today, we continue to work with staff to get all the bonds and agreements put in place, recorded, with the goal of, it has been years. I think the goal is to start construction very soon, so the project would finally happen. Other than that, I do have copies of the plans if it's easier to see, or, I could give Rob, I have a flash drive to kind of pull up anything on the screen if it's helpful to see. Otherwise, if there's any questions, again, I can answer any of them, or the applicants here too, if you have any questions for them.
Thank you.
I do have a question for you, sir. What are your plans for stabilizing the soils and planting underneath the panels and around the property? Is that turf grass? Is that native pollinators? We've had sort of a different approach by various construction companies, is how they manage their disturbed soils and ground cover.
Currently, the plans have, so around the perimeter of the project with all the landscape buffers, and kind of, I'd say like the outside of the project, it's all like a pollinator species, I'll call it a special seed mix. The majority of the areas underneath the arrays is just natural seed mix. It would be like grass cover that's local to the area based on the Maryland standards. There'd be both kind of, I'd say, 2 types of stabilization within the array. So the first is kind of during construction, when grading first occurs and they're doing, I'd say, like a majority of like the ground disturbance activity, getting the post driven, getting the racking hung, there's a temporary stabilization that goes down. So it's an annual ground cover that they'd put in place. As the project gets to be kind of finished and they're doing electrical wiring, they're commissioning the project, the entire area gets stabilized with a permanent ground cover. So that's when it's a permanent, it's not just an annual grass, it would actually come back every year, and that would get established within the balance of the array area. And I think the topsoil too would be stockpiled on site. Very little will be removed to begin with. Really just the access drives is the only area where you're not gonna put any topsoil back in place because you wanna get a natural ground beneath it and then stone on top. So that area topsoil would be stockpiled on site. But a majority of the topsoil will actually be respread to help support the vegetative
Great, thank you.
establishment.
And lastly, or at least for you, I think, in our report, it says DNR strongly encourages the applicant to adhere to all appropriate best management practices. Would you have any problem with a little more sufficient language than strongly encourage you to actually require you to follow best management practices outlined by the Soil Conservation District?
No, because we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, in most cases, I'd say we meet or exceed. So, and a lot of the times from a stormwater management perspective, we've worked with DPW to show that it meets all the state stormwater requirements. This is one of the cases similar to the Bluegrass site. There are some permanent, I'll call them basin areas. So during construction, a lot of the times temporary basins and traps get constructed to capture and retain sediment on site so it doesn't run off. Post-construction, a lot of those features, they'll be modified slightly because you don't need quite as, once grass is growing, you shouldn't have as much sediment leaving the site. We've worked with staff and they've actually requested that they kind of be left in place in some form or fashion. So we are doing that, which will actually kind of exceed what the normal stormwater and sediment control requirements are. So yeah, I'd say,
Thank you. Just
we
wanted to be-
have to meet it.
wanted to
I
be
think
clear on
DNR, they don't do the review, so I think,
Right.
they try to
And
make
that's
it as
probably
strong
why
a
the
word
language
as they
is
can.
with the way it's written. And lastly, I see Mr. Porter sitting behind you. Trey, with respect to the hauling roads and construction process, is your department comfortable with the condition of those roads and what impact the construction process may have on that?
Yes, Trey Porter, DPW. We've reviewed the roads, existing roads, conditions, roads department's gone out, done inspections. We also have a surety that was established for the roads based on a linear footage, consistent with other solar projects. So we do hold, excuse me, we do hold surety for that.
Right. Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Kathy, you have any questions?
Yes,
Yes,
thank
thank
you,
you, Madam Chair.
In
In
honor
of
of
Mr.
Mr.
Drummond as well,
and
and his
concerns,
concerns, my first planning commission meeting
had
had
a
a solar farm project on it, and I learned quite a bit that day. With the decommissioning bonds, and maybe this is best for staff.
What are I know Chris's concerns were always about how to pursue the appropriate parties if the decommissioning process needs to happen or if it goes awry. So what maybe it is for staff is, what is that process? Do we check out those responsible parties, or if someone could just briefly explain that process to me?
Because I don't have. So we don't have experience with that as staff because nothing's been decommissioned yet. I know when we had issues chasing down the folks on 404, which is now the solar array owned by Tesla, that was quite the challenge. Mr. Drummond wrote several letters to them about their landscape buffer. Ultimately, it was fixed sufficiently, but we have never had one decommissioned yet, so I honestly don't have an answer. Nick may have more experience with this.
Yeah, I'll try to explain it a little bit more, and if you have follow-up questions, just let me know. But I think for the decommissioning plan, it's a requirement of the state as well. So, we're here today to ask for the local site plan approval. There's also a state approval process with the Public Service Commission that a lot of consideration goes to these projects. So it's a requirement there too that these projects have a decommissioning bond that, in the ideal world, at the end of the useful life for this project, the panels may be replaced, the equipment may actually be, I'd say brought up to the standard at that time, and the plant could continue to operate. But knowing that there is kind of an expected life cycle for the project, decommissioning would happen at the end of the project, and panels could be taken down, posts could be removed, and then a lot of times those materials can be recycled. So it's not like they just take everything and throw it in a landfill. Likewise with a lot of the electrical cabling. So for the decommissioning plan, there's a requirement with the county to put a bond in place in the event that the project reaches the end of its usefulness, or it's abandoned in some form or fashion, or it no longer is operating. An estimate's put together, so what the cost would be to actually decommission the project. Considerations are made for some of that salvage value to say, hey, all of the electrical cabling for this site can be recycled, the steel could be recycled, panels could be. So an estimate's put together to kind of cover all of that, to say, hey, we have to get a construction team out to the field just to do the work. They're gonna actually have to remove all the equipment and then, potentially recycle it, stabilize the entire project, and essentially turn it back into the farm field or the fallow farm field that it would be today. So a plan's actually put together. I think that's been submitted to staff. It was reviewed by Mr. Drummond before. So we'd expect to continue reviewing that. I didn't, Kimley Horn, we didn't put together the decommissioning plan. The applicant did. But I will say that bluegrass that I know Mr. Drummond was very much involved in, that was used as the template. So it was followed as much as possible when developing the one for this project. And likewise with the decommissioning plan and then posting the bond, we're essentially using that as the template to say, let's do that again for this project, working with staff here.
Ms. Otis, Mr. Drummond, his biggest issues were always with recycling and whether or not there was a viable market for recycling of the panels yet. The aluminum, copper wires, the posts, the steel, we recycle those, daily. That process is established. He was always concerned that there may not be enough decommissioning nationwide to have a viable market.
I think in addition to tracking ownership of said utility, once one party signed off on their particular piece of that, it sort of went into the abyss, and for the county to be able to track ownership and therefore be able to hold whatever responsible party.
We require notification
Right.
once the project's sold, but it's only as good as if they actually do it. Bluegrass, I believe, was sold, and we did get notified.
I thought that was Chris's main concern.
It was initially, that's why the requirement of notification now exists.
That's now standard across the board.
If it happens.
Yeah, his concerns were twofold, really. Like you said, it was the notice and losing track of who owns it, and how to find that. It was also with the undervalued decommissioning plans. He argued the dollars and cents that were presented as smoke and mirrors initially, but this is fine according to everything that he reviewed, and looking at it and comparing it to others. There's no problem at our end.
I was remiss and I apologize for not introducing you as the stand-in. Sharon Brinster is standing in for Chris until, for the interim, until we have a permanent lawyer with us. I'm sorry. Okay,
Thank you, everyone. Good.
There's one other question came to mind. There aren't any batteries on the premises, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's if you were here with the bluegrass or heard any of the other solar, it's really, there's panels that generate the power and it goes to that collector substation and then ties into DPL. But yeah, there's no big battery storage proposed as part of the project.
Okay. And batteries came up because I have several solar boards, the sign message boards, and some of them are 25 years old and they're still kicking. I mean, it's just pretty amazing.
We've had a few inquiries for batteries here in the last couple of months.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if you continue to get more. I think they're being implemented across the country. We do a lot of battery storage. We've done a couple in the state, especially a lot of urban areas, emergency centers. I know Montgomery County transitioned their emergency response center to have solar and battery storage. There's some of the utilities are really trying to push the concern of a microgrid to essentially say, hey, if there was a hurricane and you were without power for a long period of time, that you essentially have just a little self-sufficient command center that, the fire department, local emergency response can use that have, they can go off the grid for 3 days and they have a battery on site that can ensure that they have power, as opposed to a diesel generator that, burns a ton of gas. And if it's a hurricane and roads are flooded, it can be hard to get more gas for it, where having a renewable energy source just makes total sense.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, ma'am.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I would just like to go on record to say that Nick and his team at Kimley Horn have been really great to work with. They're responsive. They answer the layperson's questions that I have. So I just want to thank him, not that it has anything to do with approval, but I just wanted to be on record.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, now can I get a recommendation?
Oh, shoot.
Oh, public
Not quite
comment.
yet.
We have to go to public comment. Any one here for that?
No digital.
Okay. Do we have anything, John?
Check the hall.
We do.
Doesn't look like anybody signed up.
Oh,
We have a couple
okay.
text amendments, and then Shore Rivers did not
Okay.
specify.
Shore Rivers, what's your purpose today?
Not this. No.
I'm sorry?
I'm here for the taco comments. For
Okay.
the, yeah, text amendments.
Okay. Now may I get it? Can I get a recommendation?
Madam Chair, I move resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Jones Farm Solar LLC for major site plan approval to construct a 64 megawatt utility scale solar project on a 601.156 acre parcel with a fenced solar array of 319.35 acres in the agricultural zoning district, and is more particularly described in the Planning and Zoning File SP number 23-10-0114, hereby finds that it does meet all the requirements of Chapter 18. It will not substantially increase traffic hazards and safety concerns due to traffic generated by the proposed use, the location or orientation of curb cuts, or the layout of internal circulation, does contain a layout of buildings, parking, roads, and utilities that does not substantially increase fire, health, and other public safety hazards, excuse me, is adequately buffered and screened to minimize potential adverse impacts to neighboring properties and public right-of-ways, will not substantially increase stormwater drainage or pollution, will not have an unreasonably adverse effect upon property values in the vicinity of the site, will not adversely affect public welfare, and will provide for public safety through compliance with the state fire code and with any applicable code, county or municipal fire codes, is compatible with the general character and surrounding neighborhood, and is consistent with the purpose, goals, and objectives of the 2002 Comprehensive Plan, and hereby grants concept plan approval subject to the following conditions. If by the time of construction, the panels proposed have changed from that provided on the plans, updated information must be submitted. 2, applicant must notify planning and zoning when ownership of the solar array changes, and the signage containing emergency contact information must be kept current. 3, prior to final site plan signature, provide the finalized forest conservation plan and executed long-term protection documents for recordation. 4, prior to final site plan signature, provide an automatically renewable decommissioning bond that is enforceable by the county. 5, prior to final site plan signature, provide an automatically renewable landscape surety and maintenance agreement. Per the Department of Environmental Health, until the project is decommissioned, if there are any workers on site for a period of 4 consecutive hours or longer, there shall be a portable toilet and hand washing facility provided for use. These facilities shall be provided on site for the duration of the work performed. The facility shall be regularly serviced, and all waste disposal on the disposed of off-site accordance with applicable laws and regulations. Prior to final site plan signature, any remaining edits or documents required by the reviewing agency are reviewed and approved.
I have one correction there. You had mentioned the 2002 comprehensive plan. Can we change that to 2022?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I say 2002, yeah.
Any seconds?
Second?
Okay, any further discussion? Can we call for the vote? All in favor?
Aye.
I,
All in favor? So moved.
Congratulations.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Wish they could all be so nice and neat. We're gonna take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Mr. Green's not here yet.
Absolutely.
All right, meeting's back in order. Concept plan approval, Bay Bridge Marina. Rob Gunter.
Rob Gunter again, with the Department of Planning and Zoning. So next up, as mentioned, we have concept plan for the Bay Bridge Marina. The Planning Commission may remember the previous concept plan for this site. It was approved back in January of '23. And that plan included 174 commercial apartments and more than 60,000 square feet of new commercial floor area. Since the time of that approval, this area has had a rezoning, so that made that plan no longer valid. So the applicant is here today proposing 28 residential duplex units as well as a 32-room hotel. And they are currently requesting a parking reduction of 56 spaces as well as concept plan approval. So here we go to the other side of the county, about as far away from the last project as you can get. Here we're located on Ken Island, immediately east of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. More specifically, the parcel is located at the end of Pier 1 Road in Stevensville. Current zoning of the property is airport protection and Ken Island Gateway, and the property is located within the Chester-Stevensville growth area. It's also an enterprise zone and within the priority funding area. There are some existing uses on the site, shown in black, like a translucent black here. It's the Libby's Restaurant. There are 2 office buildings, the marina itself. There's a boat repair facility as well as some storage on site. The proposed new uses are, let me turn on my fancy laser pointer here, duplex units shown here and here in blue, as well as on this corner, as well as a new hotel, which is to be located here. The existing marina parcel will be subdivided to accommodate the residential units, as well as a 1.6 acre lot for the hotel. As I previously mentioned, the applicant is proposing 28 residential units, and that is less than the permitted maximum of 35. The hotel will be 4 stories tall and provide 32 rooms. They are proposing a total of 28,070 square feet of floor area, which you can see is just 4 feet shy of the maximum permitted floor area allowed for their 1.6 acre site. The yellow lines on here depict the subdivisions that will occur as the project moves forward. Conceptually, all dimensional and bulk standards are met for the existing uses as well as the proposed hotel and duplex units. The project will require water and sewer. The applicant will make application to the Sanitary Commission for allocation. Once they receive an approved concept plan, that is what they'll use for that application. At the time of site plan review, the applicant will have to address the adequate public facilities ordinance, and this is when they will be required to address traffic as well as school capacity. The APKIG, the airport district, does provide standards to protect the airport that is just immediately south of this project. This project will comply with those standards. The proposal requires 418 non-residential parking spaces. They are currently proposing 362. A reduction of 56 spaces is requested. The residential uses require 56 spaces, and they are providing that. And there's additional availability for individual parking within garages that are on each duplex unit. They will provide public amenities. The concrete walkway along the marina will be available for the public, as well as sidewalks throughout. There'll be benches, dog waste containers, bike racks along the marina walkway, and the applicant has already installed a Vietnam memorial statue down by the Libby's Restaurant. The project conceptually meets all Chapter 18 landscape requirements. The property is located entirely within the critical area. It has a designation of IDA, intensely developed, and a modified buffer area. The proposal meets all critical area requirements. Forest conservation in this case is not applicable because the property is entirely in the critical area. Stormwater will be provided on site, and there are no streams, woodlands, non-tidal wetlands, or threatened and endangered species. So here we are coming off of the Bay Bridge, heading eastbound, just before you exit. You can see the site here. That is the Libby's Restaurant right here. This is a view from the entrance to the site at Marina Club Road. The building that you see there will be removed, and you'll likely see the hotel and several duplex units from this view. This would essentially be with Libby's at your back, looking east. This is the opposite side of the marina on Marina Club Road at the southeast corner of the marina, looking north. So here we have the architecture of the duplex units. This is obviously the roadside. This is the front view of the roadside, and all 28 units will look just like this. This would be the marina side. Similarly, a front view from the marina side. It's the proposed architecture for the hotel. The top is the parking lot or roadside view, and the bottom is the marina view. It's just a different perspective, but again, the top is the parking lot and the bottom is the marina. With that, I'll answer any questions or turn it over to the applicant.
Mr. Gunther, I have a question. In your staff report, you suggest that the redevelopment project represents a net decrease in impervious surface cover. Do we know how much that is? What that decrease would be?
Not off the top of my head.
Applicants possibly?
So the net decrease is within the modified buffer area. The overall project will have a net increase of impervious cover.
And what, any idea what that net
It's
decrease
about
in?
1.4 acres.
I'm sorry?
1.4 acres.
Oh, acre and a half? Okay, thanks. But you said increase outside of that buffer, the MBA?
Outside the MBA, correct.
You're requesting a reduction in parking spaces, or Mr. Gunther, did they use a formula of some kind to get at it? And how does that compare with current use? I know that parking spaces, for instance, are considered less of an issue than they used to be, but.
They provided a memo that should be in your packet on their justification. I will say that, so this building right here is the boat storage facility. If my memory serves me correctly, that facility requires something in the neighborhood of 85 parking spaces. That's way overparked.
85?
85.
Yeah.
It's based on a square footage and a number of employees, I believe. These facilities have, I don't know, a handful of mechanics and maybe a shop manager, and they don't receive, I mean, you can see the boats. People may drop their boat off and leave. 85 is way in excess. So staff doesn't have a problem with the reduced parking. Likewise, for the restaurant and the office spaces, there's likely to be some sharing of parking that occurs when the offices are closed. Although, if the parking for Libby's spills out into the office parking, well, they're doing really well. The marina parking itself is the one that may be a little iffy, but there's parking all the way around, so somebody may have to search. But staff does not have an issue with the reduced parking.
Thank you.
The previous plan asked for, they provided significantly more parking spaces, but they also asked for a reduction of, well, it was 160 or so, 170 maybe.
Okay, any more questions? Kathy? You're good? Okay, so you want to do your presentation?
Good morning. I'm Alan Hyatt, counsel to Bay Bridge Marina LLP. To my left is Kevin Sheeran, who you're familiar with, who's done the civil engineering work on this project. And Walt Petrie, to my right, is the manager of the general partner. It's me that you don't know. I'm a practicing attorney from Annapolis and do this type of work in the city of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, and have not appeared before the Queen Anne's County Planning Commission, so thank you for having me today. And I would just mention, just to elaborate a little bit, that Chris Drummond and I started practicing about the same time
Did you?
in Annapolis, yeah. And I knew him well, and I echo all the sentiments that I heard this morning, because if there was ever any questions about Queen Anne's County, that's who I would call. But today, I'm here on behalf of this project, and I know you've seen this before, so, I don't want
But
to
in
be...
very different form.
Yeah, and I don't want to be redundant, but it has been presented to you with multifamily, one time over 200 units, and then another time 170-some units. But, after reviewing the concept, it's back with a proposed boutique hotel, which is affiliated with the Chesapeake Bay Beach Club that is in need of those rooms, and then 28 duplexes. So it's a scaled-down version of a project, and it's an interesting, we think, an interesting mixed-use community that should be well received by the market. We know the hotel rooms are in demand, and the duplexes, we think there are buyers out there who would like this type of a product, that are near their boats, and we're talking 28, so it's not the kind of volume that was once before you. And in fact, there's less traffic generated if this project is approved with the 28 duplexes and the 32 hotel rooms, less traffic than would exist today, because there's 18,000 some odd square feet of office space that would be eliminated. And so we end up with less traffic. And then the parking, I just want to comment on the parking. The code does require all of those parking spaces for the boat repair. That doesn't make sense. I mean, there's just a few people that work there, and a few contractors come there, and to have all that parking, it is just not necessary. And of course, parking requires more coverage, and it would be grossly overparked. And what is proposed, I think, is a reduction down to like 360 more or less parking spaces from the required under code over 400, and it just makes sense. And so the the boat slips, there's a pertinent slip with a unit. With a duplex unit, so it's geared to the buyer who wants to have a boat, and we think that there's going to be a lot of interest in that. And I would suggest to you that this is a more modest use of the site, and would respectfully ask for approval. I would turn it over to Mr. Sheeran just at this moment, because I think you have a few things to elaborate on from what Rob told you, but not a lot. I don't think we want to be redundant here. So, Kevin, you want to add to Rob's comments?
Sure. Just a few, because between Rob and Alan, they pretty much covered everything I was going to talk about. So I just want, without being redundant, I just kind of wanted to put the project where it is right now in a context. We're here seeking basically a modified concept plan from the previous ones that have come before you. And what the concept plan approval will allow us to do at this point is seek sewer and water allocation, which is, as you know, an issue. It'll also allow us to get going on the adequate public facility study, which actually some of those have already begun. And it'll allow us to begin the site plan process. So we really need to get past this step to secure the sewer and water, which is, as you know, the biggest hurdle at this point. The concept plan has been under review for about 6 months now, so we've gone back and forth and fine-tuned it with staff. We've met with the Parks Department staff on site, reviewed existing amenities, reviewed relocation of existing amenities that are going to be disrupted as part of the project, and added some amenities also. So those discussions will continue through the site plan process, but we've made a good faith effort to understand their needs and understand it for them to understand what we're able to provide. We've also met with the fire marshal on site to review the proposed fire hydrant locations as they relate to the duplexes and the hotel, and they had suggested some additional standpipes, so we've incorporated that into the concept plan. And then we've also met with other agencies during the process, through the stack process. And so we feel like, oh, the other one is we haven't met with, but we've discussed with the airport. We've done initial analysis of building heights and things like that, and then discussed with them the filings, the FAA filings that will be required during the site plan process. So we feel like we've covered all the bases through this concept level, and are just seeking your approval for us to move forward to the next stage.
Okay, any questions from the?
I do, for the applicant. Mr. Petrie, in the past, you have mentioned that the current use of the marine itself by the boating public is heavily utilized. And you suggested, your council at least, through your council, that these are going to be, there's some 28 some deeded slips for that marina. If I were to bring my boat into your marina or want to load my boat from marina, how would I do that if the vast majority of your waterfront appears to be taken up with residential units or commercial space? Like, I see that you've got a couple of slips out in front of the buildings themselves, but for transient slip use, which I assume you would be.
Can you guys keep it down? We can't hear here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Which I assume you would invite. How would that work internally through the logistics of your property?
Well, we have 245 slips. We have 28 units. And the owners of the units will have priority over, and they will do this annually. So if a unit owner has a 40-foot boat and he wants a 40-foot slip, as long as he lets us know by August 15th of the prior year which slip he wants and where he wants it, that's his.
But that's not your question, right?
Oh.
I mean, you want to know how.
Like, I'm just looking at the overview. Correct, yes, Counselor is
Okay.
correct in that it seems difficult for me to get to my boat if I were to keep my boat at your marina, from what I'm looking at from this aerial.
Oh, I'm sorry.
How would I get to my boat through if I had to park out by Libby's
Yeah.
and carry my,
Do we have that other site plan here? So if you look, that plan is not very clear. Can you zoom in on that plan a little more? If you look from Libby's going towards the office, there's a turnaround. You see that turnaround?
yes, the donut there?
Yes.
Yep.
So that the yacht owner will be able to pull in there, unload, and we have carts. So they, no different than what they do now if they park on the surface. Put their stuff in the cart and they take their car and park in that parking lot. So there's one there and there's one over between the hotel and the office building,
Okay.
right there. So there's two turnarounds for the slip holders. So if they want to bring material or whatever to their boat, they'll have a place that they can pull their car around, stop, unload, and then park.
Same would hold true for a contractor coming to work on a boat.
Exactly.
Got it.
There's no parking there. They have to drop their stuff and then
Sort of a
park.
loading and unloading zone, if you will.
Correct.
Also additional parking on the south side of the Marina Basin for those slips on the south.
The smaller ones there?
Right.
Great, thanks. And next, I know you have your own boat show at the marina periodically, but with respect to other events like the Bay Bridge Swim, is that something that your property would still be
Yes.
interested in investing in the future, as far as using that, where the swimmers exit the water and then all of that is still sort of in the plan to be utilized at said property?
The swim and the run, yeah, will both be,
Oh,
yes.
the run, right.
The boat show, probably not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, only because if you were to buy a unit there and you got 28 units, you have your own lawn and you own it, you don't want 20,000 people traipsing across your yard looking at boats. So that's something that we probably will give up at some point. The show is actually this weekend, so,
Yes.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, yes, actually. At what point will you adjust the sewer capacity and availability and what's left for the rest of the world?
So we'll do that right now, after concept plan approval. I've already sent a draft application to Mr. Alan Quimby for his review. He's out, I think, until today, so hopefully after today, we can finalize that application, get that in, and schedule a hearing with the Sanitary Commission.
So I'm looking at a brain trust in front of me, so I know you haven't gone this far without at least doing a back of the envelope calculation with regards to what's available, how much more you'll need, that sort of stuff, and what'll be left. Do you have any ideas on that? Or you don't want to talk about it now?
We do, but I think we'll leave that for the Sanitary Commission.
All right. I'll be waiting.
In order to apply to the Sanitary Commission, an applicant, not just them, is required to have an approved
I
concept
get that,
plan.
but you know, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I'll just,
Not to overrule my friend over here, but we're asking for about 7,000 gallons a day more than we have today. So, in the previous application, it was 26,000.
Right.
So we've greatly reduced the request.
That's significant. Thank you for clarifying.
Public comment? Anything on? No? No. Then we're moving right along. Can I get a,
Madam Chair,
yes?
resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Bay Bridge Marina LLP for a parking reduction of 56 places under the provisions of Section 18-1-83A2, and as more particularly described in Planning and Zoning File SP number 23-11-0116, hereby finds the proposed parking scenario shown on the concept plan and is described within the parking reduction memo provided by the Bay Bridge Marina has demonstrated that there are a mix of uses that share the parking spaces, and the boat repair and maintenance building will generate less parking need than the county parking standards require, hereby grants the request for a parking reduction.
Second.
Do we need to vote on each one? Sure. Okay, all in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Okay. So moved.
Madam Chair, resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Bay Bridge Marina LLLP for concept plan approval for the creation of a development with a mix of uses, including a 55,073 square foot of existing commercial floor area, 28 residential duplex units, and a 32-room, 28,070 square foot hotel, and is more particularly described in the Department of Planning Zoning File SP number 23-11-0116, hereby finds the concept plan is consistent with the goals and objectives of Queen Anne's County zoning and subdivision regulations and the 2022 comprehensive plan, and hereby grants the concept plan approval subject to the following conditions. Any remaining edits and/or documents required by the Department of Public Works, Planning and Zoning, or any other reviewing agency be reviewed and approved. 2, the architectural and overall site design must substantially reflect the documents provided.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Congratulations.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thanks for your time. Very much. By the way, Alan Hyatt is involved in the Food Lion Center, and he's bringing Chipotle.
Oh,
Sure.
good.
When will they open, Alan?
Hopefully later this year.
Good.
the one at,
Used to be Kentucky Fried Chicken.
No, Food Lions on the other side.
Thompson Creek area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking that was a Taco Bell that we're getting here, but
Citizen,
Something we didn't recognize the name.
oh, that was the food store. The food store, it's
Like a
called,
new name we hadn't heard of.
yeah, it's like Shoppers.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Your stuff is here. They should still be open.
Okay,
Is it open? Is it open?
fine. I only have this little.
All right, let's go for the citizen-sponsored text amendment applications. County Ordinance 2405. But all with the, I think with the Bay Bridge, she said they had a huge group.
Yeah, but nobody's.
Sure.
All right, are you ready for a staff report?
Stephanie.
It's okay. Stephanie Jones, Long Range Principal Planner. The 3 citizen-sponsored text amendment applications you have before you today were submitted by Kevin Waterman through the Bay Area Association of Realtors, so that covers all 3 of the applications. 2405, which is the first one, what the applicant is proposing to do, well, it's easier to explain it this way, sorry. So currently, the code indicates that you can't place open space on what is a cluster lot that's created through a cluster lot subdivision or a planned residential development area. What the applicant is proposing to do is to remove that from the code, and in essence would allow the developer, those that are subdividing, to place that open space on individual lots that are created through subdivision. Currently, those open space areas are usually placed on a parent parcel, or they're placed on a separate lot to themselves. So open space is that standard that's required when you're going through a subdivision process through either planned residential or cluster lot subdivision. It's deed restricted as well. Depending on the zoning district you're in, it can be anywhere from 20% of the required site area up to 80%. So usually your 85% is usually your ag district, your more rural districts, and then your 20% is more of your residential areas in nature. So what, I think there's a couple of things I want to point out is your single-family cluster subdivisions. In nature, those are to be, obviously, kind of the way it's indicated, single-family cluster. The lots are to be clustered, and the open space is to be then by itself. So what this would do would create disjointed open space. So you'd be putting this open space on multiple lots that are created for the dwellings or whatever housing it may be. But the intent of open space is to not be disjointed. It's to be one whole, pretty much. This language has been in the code, I think, back to 94 in the exact wording that it is, and then you can trace it back to 87. A little bit different wording, but still the same idea as not allowing that open space on the lots themselves. So there is a history behind it in the code. Also in the comp plan, open space is looked at as a conservation method. The comp plan designates cluster lot subdivision as that conservation method itself. We account for that open space in our conservation lands in the conservation maps. So there is already, those lands are set aside for conservation purposes, but also it's second in line to mouth in the county. So it's a pretty large, substantial acreage in regards to conservation open space. The applicant's not proposing to change the amount that is required, but as into where the location that it can be. An open space in the code indicates that you can only put particular uses in open space. So we list the uses that are permitted in those areas. They would be putting open space on single-family lots. Property owners would be subject to having to keep track of that open space, and it could potentially create some enforcement issues. Obviously, having to be sure that property owners are, addressing all those requirements of open space and following the deed is what is required. So those are some down the line issues that could happen: comprehensive plan consistency and also consistency with the existing code itself. So. As far as a recommendation, the staff is not basically indicating a recommendation. We really want the applicant to indicate how this is something that would be consistent with our comp plan that was just adopted, and then also the existing code. So I would turn it over to the applicant to kind of address some of those standards.
Certainly. Thank you, Stephanie. Honorable members of the Planning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Kevin Waterman. I'm the broker of Coldwell Banker Waterman Realty, located in Chester, and the past president of the Bay Area Association of Realtors. On behalf of the association and its more than 350 members, I'm here today with Jennifer Williams, the association's Government Affairs Director, for a simple reason. Like both Maryland and the United States as a whole, Queen Anne's County is facing a crisis of housing affordability and availability. While I'm certain you all don't need the reminder, given how much of a theme that issue is in the comp plan that was just passed in 2022, we wanted to tell you a little bit more about the data confirming the unprecedentedly massive scope of the housing crisis facing this county, particularly the way it has intensified in the last, just the short time since the plan's passage. And then we wanted to dive into the particulars of the amendment stuff. So we just wanted to give that, because that's sort of the motivating spirit behind all three of our text amendments. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jennifer briefly.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing us to be here.
You have to introduce yourself.
As Mr. Waterman said, I am Jennifer Williams. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Bay Area Association of Realtors. I'm going to look at this from maybe the 10,000-foot range, and then Mr. Waterman will go into the individual text amendments that have been offered. As you all know, housing is a problem in the state and in the county. Earlier this week, the General Assembly gave final approval to House Bill 538, which is probably one of the biggest sweeping changes that we've seen at the state level. It grants density bonuses and eases zoning restrictions on qualified projects in areas adjacent to transit, owned by nonprofits and former government campuses. It removes restrictions on the construction of modular housing and streamlines the development process currently subject to excessive delays created by public hearings. The state had a number of other housing bills that were presented to them, none of which pass this session, but it's clear that the state is serious about addressing the housing shortages throughout the entire state. So this is a start. I, for one, don't believe that the state should get involved in county zoning, but they've made it clear that if the counties don't take it upon themselves to change the way they're doing things, they are going to step in. I don't think anybody in this room wants to see that happen. Your 2002 comp plan recognized the need to address a lack of affordable housing. The 2010 comp plan saw as an opportunity to provide additional housing utilizing various land regulations, developer incentives through county housing programs. Yet even though this housing shortage has been addressed since the turn of the century, it exists today more than ever. And as I mentioned, the state has made it clear, if the counties don't change the way they're doing things and take new approaches, they're going to step in and do it for you. Increasingly, housing costs in the region are exceeding the financial reach of many low to moderate wage earners, such as service sector employees, government employees, entry-level staff, and essential health personnel, as well as teachers, police, and other emergency responders. Between 2021 and 2023, the number of sales in this county dropped by 40%, yet the average price of homes went up by 10%. The 2022 comp plan has as a vision that housing will consist of sustainable walking neighborhoods, collectively economically diverse, provide living arrangement options and housing opportunities for all income levels and ages. Through a SWOT analysis, it identified affordable housing and vacant spaces as weaknesses and vacant properties as threats. It sets a goal to encourage the supply of housing of diverse types and price points to help sustain the county's economic vitality and to create a variety of housing types that are affordable to residents of all needs, ages, life stage, and income. Your plan recognizes that housing is a basic need and plays an important role in developing and maintaining successful, sustainable living environments. Quality and affordable housing are important to the county's long-term economic and social vitality. The housing vision found in the state land use article recommends providing a range of housing densities, types, sizes for citizens of all ages and all incomes. The housing vision in the state land use article recommends providing a range. The key visions set the baseline for the county to provide a sufficient, affordable, and workforce housing, along with a full range of housing opportunities that meet the needs of all. This key vision sets the baseline for the county to provide sufficient, affordable, and workforce homes, along with other options. One of the most critical issues facing the county and the surrounding region is the dwindling supply of housing that is affordable to moderate income workers. Increasingly, housing costs in the region are exceeding the financial reach of moderate wage earners. Again, the service sector, healthcare workers, teachers, fire, emergency responders. Although the home building sector once built for the middle class, this strategy has shrunk dramatically since 2010. And today, very little non-subsidized home building activity is oriented to the middle class price point. In addition to greater income discrepancy, housing prices have accelerated due to a lack of supply. The lack of supply and next to zero growth in new construction at attainable price points has led to significant challenges among many young adult households and other with moderate incomes. Many communities are starting to make zoning provisions for what is now called missing middle housing, housing types with unit sizes and densities between the traditional single-family home and multifamily housing. These are the housing types that used to be an integral part of our neighborhoods and came to dominate residential development and zoning in years past. Small lots, small homes that everyone could afford. These would include those small lot, single-family units, duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, cottage families, and small, multiple family buildings. As your plan states, and as the planning staff commented in the review of these 3 text amendments, the overall goal for housing is to encourage the increased supply of housing of diverse type and price points. The strategy set up to accomplish this is to create a supply of affordable workforce and attainable housing through various approaches, methods, and programs, encouraging and allowing appropriate density increases and a range of unit types. It is with these goals in mind that we offer these 3 text amendments. We do understand they're a rather aggressive reach, but I think what we see is that continuing to do things as we've done them over the past 10, 20, 30 years is not going to solve the problems we have. So we're going to have to kind of throw out some of the traditional ways we've done it and really look at new and innovative solutions, ways to be able to afford or to be able to provide that attainable housing for that mid-sector, that sector that is being dramatically priced out of the market today. So with that, I will let Mr. Waterman go through the individual amendments with you. Thank you.
We're doing one amendment at a time.
Exactly, yeah. We just sort of wanted to give our brief, sort of the overview first. So speaking on 2405, we believe that this is a very straightforward proposal and should not be controversial. Compared to our proposed change, the simple fact of the matter is that, as Stephanie noted, what we're proposing, it doesn't change the open space requirements, how much has to be done. All it's tweaking is where and how it's located. Meanwhile, the existing status quo is an active impediment to the very kind of infill development that the comp plan specifically calls out as desirable and to be encouraged. I believe the easiest way to explain this is going to be with a concrete example, which is why I'd like to tell you a little bit about 4606 Main Street, a property owned by Waterman Realty Company. Stephanie, could you pull up evidence?
Main Street where?
In Graysonville.
Okay.
Actually, there's one titled Evidence 1. Can we pull that one up?
I'm not sure if they're...
Yeah, there we go. So this is the original survey of the lot. You can see it was a small lot in Graysonville, just a little under a third of an acre. Our original plan for this property was to create a cottage cluster community, which, could you pull up evidence 2? Let's scroll down to the next page. One more. Yeah, so just a brief example. This is what we were looking to do. We create 5 small, affordable units. Unfortunately, a variety of regulatory barriers, which I would be more than happy to discuss at length with anyone interested at another time, made this project financially unviable. As a result, we were forced to pivot instead to creating only 2 building lots, the most that are, would have been possible to do on this lot. Could you pull up evidence 3?
And how big is this lot again?
0.6 something acres. So, back one. Yep, that one there. So, like I said, 2 building lots, which we have finished that now. However, as you can see from the subdivision plat, there are actually 3 lots. The reason for this is the code provision we are discussing now, that the zoning ordinance says required open space cannot be situated on lots created by cluster subdivision and planned residential development. It has to be maintained on residual land remaining after the creation of the new lots. In our case, we were lucky enough that we were able to give that open space lot, lot 3, to the owner of a neighboring parcel, and they were willing to accept it. But if we weren't able to do that, it would have called into question the viability of even this basic a subdivision project. An HOA is not going to be viable for a 2-lot building lot subdivision. It's just not going to, there's no way it can be a practical answer to that, which means the only options remaining are either keep a open space lot that is going to cost money without bringing any return in perpetuity, or it's going to have to get parceled in with the sale of one of the other 2 lots, meaning it's going to be, which is going to be its own challenge, as that lot is not going to add any value and will add obligation to the owner of that property. Or, not that we would go this route, I assume, or eventually try and find a way to dump it onto the county and make it their problem instead, which is not something that is desirable either. I want to take a moment and note that in all the time we spent working on this project, planning staff was extremely helpful and did all that they could to assist us and make the process easier. Also like to thank them for their comments on this proposal and answer now some of the concerns that were raised. First, I would note nothing in this proposal prevents a developer from choosing to maintain open space on a lot or lots of its own. It simply provides for incorporating it into the created lots as an option. I believe this speaks specifically to concerns that were raised about the need for common or public open space in planned residential development in particular, but it also speaks to other concerns, such as worries about fragmentation, especially in large subdivisions, and forcing lots to be larger than they would be otherwise. Incidentally, I think it is probably worth noting that a lot that is never subdivided because of requirements like these is going to be substantially larger than any lots created with incorporated open space. Another objection noted is that the proposal...
How do you figure that?
One lot, if you take one lot, and it's going to be bigger than if you take that same lot and cut it into 2.
Okay.
Saying that if you can't subdivide,
You're still going to have area of that lot that's going to be unusable to the owner.
Oh, absolutely, yes, they will still have to do that. I mean, well, they'll be able to maintain it as open space for views or what, permitted things that are allowed within the open space. I was just noting that there was a concern noted that lots may be larger than they would be otherwise, but I was simply noting that.
And that's a bad thing.
Well, depending on perspective, it might be, but it was just something that was noted in the report from the planning staff on that. So I just wanted to speak to that point a little bit.
But just so I understand, excuse me, Sharon, I was
That's
assuming.
okay.
You're saying if you didn't subdivide this lot at all and you just sold it?
Yeah, that's what I was saying is that.
You would have to have, there's open space.
No, you would not have, no. I was simply stating that if our concern is larger lots, people building on larger lots rather than smaller lots, a lot that doesn't get subdivided is larger than the created subdivided lots, even if the open space is incorporated into the new lots. That's all.
So what about, is this, I assume this lot is on sewer and water?
Yes, it is.
Are there lots out there that are not like this, that are not on sewer and water? And how do you handle that?
I mean, potentially they would be.
Sewage reserve areas that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, they would still have to have SRAs, everything else. None of the other rules would change on that. Let's see. Just another noted objection from staff's remarks were that the proposal could create open space areas that are not contiguous. Given that all subdivisions will still, subdivisions will still need to obtain site plan approval, I personally believe that this could be addressed at that phase with, even with the language provided in our amendment. But if staff and the commission feel it necessary, we would not have any objection to language being added stating that all open space must remain, to the greatest degree possible, contiguous, even if spread across multiple
It's
lots.
not staff's job to correct your work. It's your job.
Well, I was saying, if you would like to have an amendment to recommend that amendments to the proposal, we would not have any objection to that.
It's not staff's job to do that.
I would suggest as part
To
of,
change your wording. It's
No.
not their,
Madam Chair, if I may, I'm not suggesting that staff should do that. I'm saying if, as part of a favorable recommendation, you would say we would give a favorable recommendation with these changes. I was saying that we would not be, we
that
would.
means we have to know what the changes are, and we have to say what the changes are. And that's not our job either.
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm not opposed to doing that. However, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe I can change the language that we have submitted at this time. Is that correct?
What would happen is the planning commission can suggest a recommendation. Within their recommendation to the planning commission, or to the county commissioners, they can put in a condition. That is a technical process. But no, it is not the job of the planning commission to figure out what that wording may actually look like, or if it would impact any other places of the code.
And how can we recommend something to the commissioners that we don't even know what it is that we're recommending?
I mean, like I said, if there's some way I can work with, we can work with you all, we are happy to do that as, to help, determine that language, in conjunction with all, the relevant parts that need to be
Not
done.
our job.
Well,
May I ask another question?
Yes.
Why didn't you bring this up during the comp plan process? It's
Well,
just been
That's interesting.
finalized.
well, I believe part of it is that this is the comp plan is about a large overarching vision. It is about goals, strategies, things like that. It's not about the specific areas, doesn't get into the granularity of the zoning ordinance. That is done either through citizen-sponsored text amendments or through the comprehensive zoning review ordinance, comprehensive overhaul of the zoning ordinance.
Pretty significant stuff's affecting potentially how many lots? How many lots are we talking about here? This is Kent Island, correct?
So it's not specific to this lot. The text amendment is specific to the entire county.
That's what my question
Yeah,
is.
I wanted to
with
make sure
regards-
that was
Yeah,
clear.
no, I'm
Yep.
sorry if I wasn't clear.
Yep.
But NC, it's Kent Island.
Yeah, so anywhere that,
Grayson Mill's not Ken Island.
any-
Well, it kind of is to me. But
anywhere that
Keep
cluster,
moving, Ken
cluster,
Island.
it kind of is.
anywhere that cluster subdivision or planned residential development is permitted, this is where this deed restricted open space is required. So essentially, it's throughout the entire county.
So again, how many potentially, how many lots are involved in here? And this, do we have even an idea?
Thousands.
I mean, there's existing subdivisions that have been done, but new ones that would come in would be able to put the open space on the individual lots is what would be looked at. But yes, it could be anywhere that those.
Which is going to change your comprehensive plan.
Yes, the comp plan is very, very heavy on conservation and preservation. So an open space and cluster subdivisions is a technique for conservation and preservation. And it's listed under that section of the comprehensive plan.
And we don't believe that that this proposal would go and compromise that objective either, since it, as has been noted, it doesn't reduce open space requirements at all.
Well,
But before
I have a question, and it's probably for you. If they're looking to do this on this lot that he's brought forward as an example, wouldn't that be done under variance and not under changing the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, Amy Mordock, Planning Director. There would not be currently a variance to the location of open space, or because that isn't baked into the code as it is written right now. So compliance with open space isn't varianceable.
Is that a word?
Yes, it is a word in our view.
I get it, yeah.
And Madam Chair, this was presented to you as an example. There's no request being made. This is an old
Completed subdivision.
completed subdivision. So no one's looking for any changes on this one,
Okay.
just using it as an example of what
Okay.
happens.
With that, I would like to speak now to the consistency of this amendment with the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. As far as the zoning ordinance is concerned, this amendment will do nothing to change total open space requirements, nor would it, as noted, change requirements for common use open space in planned residential
If it
development.
doesn't change anything, then why even bring it forward?
It doesn't change, it does make a change. I'm saying it doesn't change the total amount of open space that's required, and it doesn't change other requirements, such as having to have common open space area in a planned residential development. What it does change is allowing open space to be located on individual lots that are created, rather than having to have this extra open space lot in areas where it may not potentially be, in which in turn may render projects viable that otherwise would not have been. Further,
How do you enforce something, like if you had a development, say 20 houses, and you had your open space divided up on 20 lots? How do you enforce not using it and keeping it as open space? How is the county supposed to enforce that?
I would think no differently than they enforce any other covenanted or easement requirement. That currently, there's also that we
Got
have,
20 places to check rather than one?
well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, there is some of that, but a large chunk is also enforced on the basis of reporting, is it not?
So what would happen is they would have to probably post the area that is the deed restricted area of the property, probably put signs on it. We'd always have to be sure that they're in compliance in that area. The enforcement officers are always out and about. They would know where those areas are, and if there is an enforcement issue, obviously, they would bring it to the attention. But the fact that it being on, like you said, 20 lots as opposed to one is different, yes.
So does enforcement mean, did they keep the grass cut, or does it mean that they put up a building on that open space?
You're specific to open space, right?
Yes.
I think they can maintain the grass. Buildings are different. It depends on the permitted uses that are listed.
My point is, what if they don't maintain the grass?
I think, well, that would be in the open space or outside of open space? Right.
The open space.
I would,
How do you manage all this stuff?
I think they could choose to mow it or not mow it, because it's open space probably.
So you have two neighbors, one's neat and one's a slob. Right?
Because the open space, that is kind of an intention of open space to have large grassy areas, so I see it as an argument that's made.
Let me see. Furthermore, as if you review the report, there are 3 bulleted points for the purpose of open space, and it is our contention that this, making this change does not interfere with any of those 3 bulleted points that are noted as part of the district purpose statements for open space, nor would it in any way prevent or limit the preservation of open space. In fact, I think in some ways it may arguably enhance that by giving property owners a sense of ownership and security in the status of property as open space by knowing that they themselves own it rather than some third party. I certainly can tell you that any number of times working as a realtor that I have had people ask about, well, what about that, this, property that backs up to open space about, well, is this always going to be that way? Because, you just don't, even if it's protected that way, it's, someone who's looking, it's hard to know that if they don't own it. Whereas if you can say that, this is what you own as the open space and it has to, then they have security and knowledge in that fact. As concerns the comp plan, I would like to refer you all to the strategies and actions section of Chapter 9, the housing article, if that's possible to pull up. If not, I can certainly quote from it.
I don't think, I'll have to pull it up on.
Thank you. I can go ahead on that. And Goal 9-1, Strategy 1 states, and I quote, "Foster opportunities to create a supply of affordable workforce and attainable housing through various approaches, methods, and programs." At BAR, we believe it to be self-evident that just about any change that eases the development process furthers this goal. We also believe that within the strategy recommendation 1, encourage and allow appropriate density increases and a range of unit types to make affordable workforce housing and attainable housing an economically viable development option is relevant here. It isn't a density increase, but it is a change that specifically speaks to the economic viability of projects.
How is it talking to the economic viability if you're taking the space and you're putting it in 20 of them?
As specifically noted, when you look at, especially on infill, small, more infill type projects like this, where you only where a very small number of lots are being created, it is not economically viable to set up an HOA to maintain the common area, which means the only options are going to be, as noted, it will be the developer maintains it in perpetuity, which no one is going to, I don't think anyone is going to be open to doing something that's going to, they're going to spend some amount of money maintaining forever. They will have to, or it's going to have to become the ownership owned by one of the buyers of one of the newly created lots, which means effectively you're at the same point as with the concerns about if they're on individual lots that, someone's going to have to be monitoring to make sure, there's still the same enforcement and monitoring concerns because they're in the same area. But if you are able to locate it, if you can just simply create and have the open space on those individual lots, it makes it easier to do small-scale infill subdivisions.
I want to point out one point. So one of the following text amendments is to basically remove a requirement for the lot size, the minimum lot size in the NC district. So if you're removing a requirement of the minimum lot size, but yet you're going to tell someone they have to put open space on their property, it's kind of counterintuitive, not really, going with each other. So just to point that out for the next one. But
Madam Chair, one question. In your proposal, there's no insurance or any language that requires affordable housing. You've talked about it, but I don't see anything that says that this is going to result necessarily in more affordable housing. Point 2, to this specific requirement, is public access part of open space? And if that's the case, are people going to have residents tramping across their backyard to get to their open space?
My understanding is that there is no specific provision that applies generally that all open space must be common or public access. There are specific requirements that certain types of developments must have open space that is common or public access. So it's not going to, I feel very confident that from a market-based perspective, no one is going to put common open space on privately individually held lots. That is still going to be, market demands will ensure that still gets set up on its own parcels.
How do they access it, though?
How do
I access open space in one of these developments that you're proposing?
You may cut your grass and I may not, so I want to go sit on your space.
Well, there's nothing that,
Am I going to bring my picnic hamper across your backyard to get to the open space?
So planned residential development does require some type of access for public. There's a percentage that is required. But an example of that would be like Gibson's Grant, where a part of that is the open space area where there is a trail that goes through. So that's an example of kind of what I think you're trying to talk about.
and that is also part of what the site plan process is for, to go and, if you can see that a developer has said, well, here's our common, we're doing a planned residential development, here's our common open space area, and it's completely encapsulated without any means of direct access, that's something that you should definitely be raising as a concern, an issue, and a condition to make sure that they are accessible.
So
but there
we're
is
back
other
to-
open space that does not have to be publicly accessible or common. It just has to be maintained as open space. And on your question about affordability, this does not directly have affordability requirements. However, the issues of housing affordability are at their core, a problem of supply. That there simply is, there are not enough houses relative to the amount of people who want to have houses. The way you solve that is you find more ways to increase the supply to make it easier to create housing for the market to match that demand.
I get supply and demand, but in your discussion about this, you relied heavily on the concept of creating affordable housing. I'm suggesting that if that's one of your justifications for this, you should certainly be a lot more specific about how that's going to work.
I think a big part of this is by making it easier to create, especially in an infill fashion, smaller lots, which reduce your upfront the land costs, which in turn make a smaller house, which is also more affordable,
But you're asking,
financially viable.
You're asking a change to the whole plan, the overall comprehensive plan.
Not to the zoning ordinance, not to the comp plan.
Yeah, but this is part of the comp plan. The zoning ordinance is created to make the comp plan work.
Well, exactly. It is the implementation of the comp plan, and as we're starting to dive into, we believe that this change enhances the ability of the zoning ordinance to do exactly that, to meet the goals of the comp plan.
But it doesn't have anything to do with affordability.
Respectfully, I would disagree on that, that it improves the ability to create supply, and that inherently will improve affordability. It may not do it on the margin.
Does that mean the real estate group is going to start lowering the price on the properties?
Well, just to be clear, realtors don't set prices. Individual homeowners set prices. Just want to make that very clear, that we are not the ones who set prices, and that prices are, however, prices are a function of
developers do.
Prices are a function of markets, which are informed on the basis of supply and demand. The fact is,
you're bringing apples and oranges and trying to make watermelon out of it.
I think if you look at that subdivision proposal, the original one, it showed this lot, and a developer purchased that lot and paid a certain amount for it. Their original proposal was to create 5 new homes on it, which means that their cost of land for each of those homes would have been 1/5 the cost of the entire lot. Due to the regulations, they could only create 2 homes. So the cost of land for each of those 2 homes was substantially more. Thus, the sales price of the 2 homes versus 5 homes would each be increased.
And you can flip it and say that it was originally for one home, and they were able to put on 2 homes.
although I think it's worth pointing out that, in terms of affordability of the end user affordability, when you can divide the more units you can divide a set fixed cost over, the lower those costs get. So what cost would be less for 5 is going to be more for 2 and even more for 1 that you have to be able to sell the home for in order to recoup costs. Goal 9.1 Strategy 2 states, continue to implement various approaches, methods, and programs that promote affordable, workforce, and attainable housing. Also, Recommendation 2 specifically states, promote infill and redevelopment activities. I believe it is self-evident from the example provided that the current rule is in fact actively detrimental to people pursuing infill development, and its repeat and removing that provision would support the stated goal and strategies. Goal 9-2 states, promote opportunities and programs to increase housing affordability for all county citizens. And Strategy 2 specifically says, identify land use policies to encourage housing availability and affordability. To be clear, this change is not going to fix things on its own, but it is an undeniable fact that at the margin, something that makes it easier to turn 1 lot into 2 or 3 is going to improve housing affordability. With all the above, I believe, is Barr's position, there should be no question that this change accords with both the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan and will be a positive benefit to the county by giving developers more options without imposing new requirements on them, on on them or circumventing requirements for positive things like common open space and planned residential development. The Bay Area Association of Realtors respectfully asks for your favorable recommendation of the amendment.
But we're not, just to be clear, we are not creating requirements. The requirements were there. We're not creating new requirements at all, which you just said.
No, I'm saying that we're saying this change doesn't impose any new requirements. We're saying that it's a positive benefit because it gives developers more
New
options.
requirements on every.
We're saying it gives
every
developers.
person in that 20 group that now has to take care of some open space on their own property that they didn't have to worry about before. But anyway, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did, but since we're wrapping this conversation up, I feel it's valuable to contextualize a few of the points that have been raised in the context of this proposal and then the other two, because the three text amendments really do work together to achieve a desired outcome. So I want to emphasize that the Bay Area Association of Realtors, very specifically Kevin and Jennifer and some other members, were very actively engaged in our comprehensive plan update and offered extremely valuable insights and even edits to our housing section. To the same point, the cottage homes provisions were brought forward as a citizen-sponsored proposal through Bay Area of Realtor representation, and we were very enthusiastically in support of it. So I just want to say that the affordable housing goals and the mixed-use development goals and the redevelopment of our areas in the county that were formerly a part of the community plans that have all been reabsorbed, and our commitment to revise all of those standards, that I understand exactly where Kevin is trying to go with these proposals. We all agree. It's simply the method of kind of taking a sword to the NC district or to open space without fully looking at how we're going to accomplish it comprehensively is the reason that staff wasn't in a position to support these individual text amendments. And I think that the conversation that I've seen as this very first text amendment, and I think we're going to be spending more time on this first proposal, and the others will fall into place, illustrates how complicated it is and why exactly trying to do this a district at a time probably isn't going to allow us to address the comprehensive plan guidance. We all agree that affordable housing is a key priority, and means of making that happen through increased densities, through incentivizing, is very important. And our staff has been at the table through the drafting of that legislation through this session, has offered substantive comments on the governor's package, legislative package, and we're all pretty much in agreement. And as I mentioned, in a lot of ways, Queen Anne's County has some of the programs in place that the state is looking for, and we're trying to make them even better. So I did want to point out that we're all trying to get to the same place, and the level of engagement that Kevin has held in this conversation has been extremely valuable, and I would look forward to that same input that we need as we are updating our zoning code comprehensively. And I know that he will do that, and I know he just kind of wanted to jump start with these text amendments. I also wanted to ask Rob Gunter to address some of the comments that were made about the cottage homes, because we were all very excited that we could have seen a cottage home development. So I did want to give staff the opportunity to address some of the ways that that review was represented. But otherwise, I really just wanted to talk about the comp plan and the comprehensive code update as relates this topic.
Thank you, Amy.
Yep.
Very appreciated.
Back again, Rob Gunter, Department of Planning and Zoning. And I just want to make one comment to correct something that was stated. The previous subdivision that you saw, it was stated there were originally 5 lots that were no longer viable because this open space regulation made it so. That is emphatically not true.
I apologize.
Those were cottage homes, and they were going through the process. The applicant received numerous comments from SHA and decided economically they didn't want to move forward with the project. That's why that project stopped, not because of open space requirements.
Okay.
Thank you. And I apologize if that impression was given. That was not the intent. I was simply contextualizing the progression of that
But
particular project.
It was certainly taken that way.
Okay, the issues, like I said, there were SHA, stormwater, fire marshal, certain fire marshal, really, there were a variety of different regulatory requirements, but I would agree, open space was not one of the issues that derailed the cottage project. There were other ones there. My apologies for the mistaken impression.
We go on to public comment?
Yeah, we have
Are you
nothing
finished
further.
with yours?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Public comment, Ann? Is it Richards?
It is.
Okay. With Shore Rivers.
Good morning. My name is Annie Richards. I'm your Chester Riverkeeper with Shore Rivers. I'm here today to thank the planning staff for submitting really thoughtful comments to give context to this text amendment seeking to incorporate open space into these smaller lots or cluster subdivision. I'm here to speak on the benefits of larger contiguous open space for water quality in our local rivers and the opportunity to provide access to our local residents to the outdoors and our environment where it is required and allowed through our code. Recently, the Science and Technical Advisory Committee with the Bay Program, which oversees our TMDL requirements for bay restoration, released a report that talked about the fact that we won't be meeting our Chesapeake Bay restoration goals next year in 2025. And this CSER report addresses ways that we need to change our strategies to get back on track with our restoration goals. A huge part of the reason that we aren't meeting those restoration goals is because of non-point source pollution. So pollution that can't be traced to a single factory discharge pipe or other means. Stormwater runoff from urban development is the fastest growing source of non-point source pollution in the state of Maryland, supplied by this CSER report. And while here on the Eastern Shore, we enjoy many, many rural areas, we do have areas of urban development that is growing. And with our housing crisis that has been identified by the governor, we know that urban stormwater impacts will continue to increase as development increases. Having large contiguous open space will provide stormwater and filtration benefits as that water runs off of our development. And it will also create open space opportunities that are realistic for the public to access and enjoy. And notice that Stephanie raised the example of Gibson's Grant as an example of public access for a community. We have also seen that community recently reclaim part of a public access facility in the form of a fishing pier, because when that developer put that public access requirement in place to meet requirements, it was not really adequately sized or resourced to meet the demands of its use, and it put a really unfair impetus on the community members to then maintain that decision in perpetuity. I feel like this text amendment is going to kind of set the trend for those types of mistakes to repeat. And so Shore Rivers would respectfully request that the Planning Commission does not support this text amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is Jay Fostad, Queen Anne County. Conservation?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
But I see QAC.
Members of the commission.
What do you have on here?
I'm sorry?
What do you have on here? Where are you from?
I put QACA, Queen Anne's Conservation
Oh,
Association.
I see the C. I thought it was
Yeah.
part of the A. Okay.
Madam Chair, before I begin with my actual comments, I just want to tell you a quick story, only because of your comments earlier today. I've been coming to Planning Commission meetings for 23 years. And every single meeting, both in this building and in the last one, I always looked over to my right and there was Chris. And so for the first time, I have to say it is really weird looking over there and not seeing him there. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. I've looked over all three of these text amendments, 2405, 2406, and 2407. Queen Anne's Conservation Association would recommend an unfavorable recommendation to the commissioners for a variety of reasons. I've highlighted a couple of things in the staff recommendations, but over and over again, it seems like all three of these really have the potential to create some substantial problems moving forward. It really appears to me to be an end around to the comprehensive plan, and I think because of a lot of the inherent problems in here, the Planning Commission would be doing itself a favor by advancing a unfavorable recommendation. I guess that's all I have to say. I could add a lot more, but in the interest of time, thank you.
Thank you, Jag. Jennifer Williams, Bay Area Realtors.
Yes, I've already spoken, Madam.
Okay. So I guess that will conclude public comment. Can I get a recommendation?
Is there anybody online?
Sir?
No digital.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion. Resolved that the Planning Commission makes an unfavorable recommendation to the County Commissioners regarding citizen-sponsored text amendment number 24-05, Bay Area Association of Realtors, care of Kevin Waterman, 18-1-12, permitted uses in open space to repeal 18-1-12B to allow for required open space to be placed on cluster lots created through cluster subdivision or planned residential development. The Planning Commission provides the following findings. Article 2 of Chapter 18.1 includes the purpose statement for 18.1. The purpose statement includes preserving open space as new development occurs. Fragmenting open space would not be consistent with this. 2, open space is included in the district purpose statements across multiple zoning districts as follows: providing functional open space and required public facilities as part of a unified development to ensure resource protection and preservation, and a single-family cluster with significant and moderate open spaces. 3, I think I'm on. This specific open space provision has existed in the county since 1994, but even in the 1987 code, the intention was to not place open space on lots that were intended for residential use. And lastly, I think 4, open space is viewed as a method for conservation in Queen Anne's County. Within the comprehensive plan, the acres of open space are included in the total acres of preservation within the county.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
So it will not be approved. Let's go.
Pass with an unfavorable.
Did you actually
It's
say
something
whether it
else.
was consistent or not with the comprehensive?
It is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. 5, may I amend my, should I read it again?
Well, I think it should be amended.
Okay, do I have to amend it, or does someone else have to? I'd like to amend, Madam Chair, may I please amend my recommendation to include that this proposed text amendment is inconsistent or not consistent with the current 2022 comprehensive plan for Queen Anne's County.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed?
That was in a favor.
Okay, we are done.
Mr. Chairman, I can provide you, if you want, I can provide you my notes if you want to.
She for or against, I think there was a discrepancy.
She was for the amendment.
She was an aye.
She was for the amendment.
Okay, for the change, all right.
Not for the change, not for the,
For his amendment, for his.
right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, second motion.
Right. Let's go to Bay Area 2406.
Right, so the second text amendment, citizen-sponsored, this citizen-sponsored text amendment is to remove multiple dimensional and bulk standards that are designated in the Neighborhood Conservation District. This is specific to NC 815 and NC 20. So within the NC district, it is broke down into a multiple array of sub-districts pretty much. So like I said, this is only specific to those three. There's a total of 6. What they're doing is removing the minimum requirement that indicates when you subdivide, what the beginning lot size can be, and then what the resulting lot size basically can be. So they're removing the minimum site area and minimum lot area. By removing those, it's not clear as to how subdivisions would be calculated in the future. Whether striking that, it means that the subdivision is not possible because it's not listed, it's not permitted, or the fact it's a minimum of 0. So there's not really a surety as to how to calculate that if we were to receive a subdivision application after something like this would potentially go through. The NC district in itself was kind of designed around existing neighborhoods. There's a lot of older neighborhoods in the county, and what the NC district does, it breaks it down on the average lot size. So there's already some type of mechanism to address these lots. They're kind of already different in size, so they've kind of been coupled together already. And then the purpose statement indicates that it's to basically to preserve the character, density, and scale of the existing neighborhoods. So by removing some of these bulk and dimensional standards, you potentially could allow for an endless number of lots. This would be inconsistent with our comprehensive plan, really looking at our adequate public facilities. We had a lot of discussions about our sewer capacity. NC district, these districts are located in that service area, so it would be putting an impact on those on the sewer, as also roads and schools. You're potentially creating new houses, so there's an infill of people. You also have to look at, there's other standards that still have to be met. If you can create a small lot, you still have to meet your side yard setbacks. Well, what size is the house could potentially going to end up being? I don't know. Do they have to ask for a variance? Will we potentially see a big influx in Board of Appeals variances for setbacks, for impervious cover, for lot coverage? So it's not, the text amendment, like Amy has kind of said, she understands and the county understands that there is an issue with affordable housing and just having the availability for more housing. But the fact that this is just for one district, for 3 of those sub-districts, is not looking at the rest of the county in a whole. You're really, it's inconsistent with the comp plan because it's not done comprehensively. We really look at density as something we'd want to look at as an entire scale of the county. I don't think just kind of striking these 3 sub-districts is something that would be very favorable for the county, only because the calculations of those subdivisions would not be, it's uncertain as to how that would occur. So, also, let's see, and as the same as the previous one, the county or the staff recommends the same recommendation. We don't have a support, but really want to turn to the applicant as to how this meets the comprehensive plan and the existing code. So I'll let Kevin address that.
Thank you. As you have had explained to you, this amendment proposes to do away with minimum lot sizes and minimum site areas in the 3 densest residential zones of the county zoning ordinance. We recognize this is a potentially ambitious ask, although perhaps less so than it may seem at first appearance. Zoning doesn't exist for the purpose of freezing a place in amber, never to change again. It exists to allow change to occur in a controlled, paced fashion, where all areas gradually over time increase in intensity to their next higher level of use. And that is precisely what this amendment does. By limiting the removal to the NC8, NC15, and NC20 zones, the change is restricted to those areas already identified for the most intensive residential uses. Coincidentally, these areas are also the areas which, by and large, have already been developed. While I will readily admit to my error if I'm mistaken, I don't believe there are any large swaths of land in these zoning categories that haven't already been built on at this point. So what this amendment is really about is taking our densest residential zones and allowing them to start experiencing that next step up in intensity via infill development and redevelopment, making it easier to take what is currently a lot able to support one house and maybe let it support 2, or at the outside, maybe 3 units. Make it easier to replace a rundown house that needs to be torn down with multiple, more affordable units rather than a single, pricier unit. It's also important to note that at its heart, in many ways, this is a conservative change. There's only one thing that's changing, and that's how big a lot has to be, and only in those specified zones. When a project comes before you, you'll still be looking at whether that project meets environmental requirements like stormwater and SRAs, assuming if we're on septic or other environmental considerations. You'll still be looking at whether it meets safety requirements like fire marshal approval and adequate space for EMS vehicles. You'll still get to look at any other required provisions like setbacks or traffic impacts or any relevant aesthetic considerations that might be in play. I believe this helps speak to some of Plan and staff's noted and legitimate concerns. For example, staff has noted the purpose of the NC zone is to help preserve the character, density, and scale of existing neighborhoods. This is certainly achieved by preserving all those other requirements, and in fact, removing the size requirement likely enhances the objective, as many of these communities feature a substantial number, if not a majority, of lots that predate the zoning ordinance. For example, they reflect their reality and how they're put together. For example, if you go to Bay City, pick any 10 lots at random, more likely than not, you will end up with all or almost all of them being 15,000 square feet in size, even though Bay City is in NC 20. One comment from Plan and staff I wanted to give particular attention to is their very legitimate question about the logistics of implementation were this to be passed. In our drafting of these, our assumption is that not having a reference to a site area or lot size would mean those are understood to be 0, not prohibited. Likewise, it was very much not the intent to declare planned residential development as prohibited, so if Planning Commission wants to issue a favorable recommendation to the proposal with a condition of change in the language to clarify that issue, that's something we would have no objection to, with, and would be happy to work with to develop language that does do that.
Not our job.
But it is, you are permitted to place a condition on it, and we are happy to work with the commissioners, with whoever is necessary to develop that proper language. I believe this takes us to the question of consistency with the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. With regards to the zoning ordinance, Barr believes that even though it may seem radical on its face, this change would in fact remain consistent. As has been noted both by Plan and staff and myself, all requirements except for lot size, lot area, and site area would remain unchanged. And these will substantially check any major departures from existing communities and are more than adequate to maintain the goals of the stated zones. Plan and staff has also noted that these requirements exist for all other zones, but I believe it is important to note that these zones are relatively unique in the county. They are already some of the highest density communities, and indeed, many of the communities with these zoning categories already exist at higher levels of density than could be created today. So it would actually be more consistent, not less, to make the change. Turning to the comprehensive plan, this change would accord exceedingly well with the goals and strategies of the housing chapter. Strategy 1, Recommendation 2 of Goal 9-1 specifically calls for encouraging and allowing density increases in a range of unit types, and this change is explicitly that. Strategy 2 talks about promoting infill and redevelopment activities, which this also very much does by focusing on our densest areas where such projects are most appropriate. Goal 9-2, Strategy 2, calls for identifying land use policies to encourage housing affordability and availability, and its recommendation 3 states, include opportunities for small lot single-family units, duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, cottage courts, and small multifamily buildings within county development codes, which this amendment would be very clearly enacting. I believe there is a strong case that this could even bolster Goal 9-1, Strategy 3, supporting opportunities for county citizens to age in place, and Goal 9-3, preserving the county's existing housing stock. For people with fixed incomes and homes on larger lots, this change could provide an opportunity for them to subdivide, create a saleable build-in lot, which they could then use to pay for improvements that would enable them to keep the home up or make improvements to allow aging in place. I know this proposal might be a lot for some to swallow, but the fact is we are in a crisis here in Queen Anne's County, as was so aptly demonstrated by my colleague's testimony earlier. Queen Anne's County is still a great place to live, work, and play, and everyone deserves the chance to do just that, not just the wealthy and those lucky enough to already have a toe in the door. And I know planning staff is just as concerned as we at BAR are about that, but they favor a comprehensive approach, as Stephanie and Amy have both brought up. However, I don't believe that this amendment, or our other changes for that matter, are incompatible with making a comprehensive approach. Indeed, by passing these now, I think the county, not only will we be taking the first steps towards needed reform, but I believe the county will potentially be able to obtain valuable data for that could then inform how it moves forward with the other the comprehensive zoning changes in both this and in other zones as well. To paraphrase an old saying, the best time to ensure housing affordability and availability was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. Queen Anne's County needs action now. We believe that this proposal is part of the answer to helping ensure future generations of county residents can afford to live in the place they grew up. But if you disagree, honestly, that's fine too. We just want to ensure that the conversation about serious, substantial changes in county land use policy starts happening now, and that all ideas are on the table, not just minor tinkering around the edges. We ask for your favorable recommendation on this amendment.
Okay. Any public comment? Mr. Falstaff.
Madam Chair, Jay Falstead, Queen Anne's Conservation Association. Just to be on the record, I would just reiterate some of the comments that I made earlier, and I would just urge you to look at bullet number 5 in the staff report. This text amendment could potentially cause an increase in the number of Board of Appeals cases because the above standard requirements cannot be met at the time of construction, essentially placing a burden on the permitting process as opposed to the development review process. Again, we would just urge that you would provide an unfavorable recommendation to the county commissioners. Thank you.
Any more public comment? Do you have anything? Okay. Questions?
No questions.
Do I get a recommendation?
Madam Chair, excuse me, I'll like to make a reservation for dinner.
Where are we going?
Wow, it's been a long day. Sorry, resolution. Resolved that the Planning Commission makes an unfavorable recommendation to the County Commissioners regarding citizen-sponsored text amendment number 2406, Bay Area Association of Realtors, care of Kevin Waterman, 18-1-19E, Neighborhood Conservation, NC District, dimensional and bulk requirements, and 18-1-36, Planned Residential Development Standards, to repeal residential density and bulk standards to potentially allow for greater density in the NC District. This includes repealing NC 8, NC 15, and NC 20 standards for minimum site area and minimum lot area for planned residential development, minimum lot area for a large lot subdivision, and lot area for single-family cluster division, and provide the following findings of facts. By removing the standards in their entirety, it is not entirely clear how the subdivision areas will be calculated. All other districts in the county require these development standards. NC District purpose in attachment, Tom, that it highlights preserving the character, density, and scale of existing neighborhoods. And the 2022 comprehensive plan addresses that limited sewer capacity at the KNSG wastewater treatment plant. And lastly, is not consistent with the 22 comprehensive plan.
Have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh. Okay, so moved. Now we're on to 2407.
All right, so this amendment here is also in regards to the Neighborhood Conservation District, which we had just talked about. What they're proposing to do is to repeal the maximum residential density requirement that is currently listed in the code in the NC district. What this does is density basically equates to the number of lots that can be created within that subdivision. So what they're doing is removing that in its entirety, not replacing it with any other standards. All districts within the county have a density requirement. It might be that it's based on percentage in some other districts, but there still is a density requirement irregardless of what district that you're in. This is kind of the same as the previous amendment. It's not really clear how we would calculate these in the future in the code. So if it was to be approved, I don't know exactly how implementation would occur based off what is proposed. The applicant did mention that we would base it off of the minimum lot area, I think, in the application, but that is not proposed in the code itself. This could potentially create an endless number of lots. I think I've done some general math. What it would do, it would be a multiplier of 2, basically, of lots itself. So if you traditionally could make 2 lots, you would probably be able to make 4 or 5. But that's just been a real, scenario of just taking lot size and the minimum lot size, not equating any other requirements in the code. Also, you have to contemplate, whether this, whether the parcel in the end will be able to meet all the other requirements, kind of like this is still looking at one requirement as it comes to subdivision, but there's multiple others that you have to look at. So density, it's part of the process of subdividing. So if you remove that one, you still have all the others you have to meet. Pretty much. Also, I'd like to point out there was some history in the code to this, actually. Previously, in 2004, which was the last time our code was updated, when that code revision was done, they had forgot to put in some wording in the density calculations for the NC district. They had to go back and add that again, reaffirming how density is calculated in the NC district. So there is some history in your staff report if you want to look at it itself. Also, we kind of go back to the sewer capacity. The NC district is throughout the entire county, but we would really be looking at, obviously, also our sewer capacity issues, roads, like we discussed with the previous amendment. Also, density should be analyzed across the board, across all the districts themselves. If we're going to be changing one particular district, it's probably not appropriate to not look at everything else. So really, this is something that should be done comprehensively as opposed to one amendment itself. So same recommendation for the previous. Staff does not have a recommendation and really turns to the applicant themselves to provide support for the comp plan and the code.
Thank you. Yep, the final proposal BAR has put forward for you is Ordinance 24-07, removing the minimum density calculation for the NC zone. We believe that this should be seen as a non-controversial common sense change. As Plan and staff has noted, while there are density calculations in all zone, the fact is the NC zone is unique in calculating its cluster subdivision maximum density through use of the large lot subdivision density. In no other zone, as far as I'm aware, is there a requirement that density be artificially capped for clusters by how many lots can be created through large lot subdivision. Regardless of how small the cluster lots may be or how many could be created within the same acreage, given the stated minimum lot size for cluster lots, as well as other requirements. The practical effect of this is to bias subdivisions in the NC zone, and in fact to heavily bias subdivisions in the NC zone in favor of large lot subdivisions and against cluster projects. To give a hypothetical example, if the same 5 acres of NC1 can give you 5 1-acre lots through large lot subdivision, but still only give you 5 half-acre lots through cluster subdivision, then there is virtually no incentive to create these smaller lots, and a strong disincentive to do so, since the same land cost will be spread over the same number of smaller and less individually valuable lots. Plan-In staff has several comments on this, which I believe are important to address. One of the foremost concerns is how residential density would be calculated absent the current calculation. I would posit the answer is the answer would remain implicit within the code, and a codified calculation is unnecessary. It is the site area divided by the minimum lot size requirement of the type of subdivision being proposed, then moderated by further by requirements such as open space and stormwater management. However, if staff and the commission would prefer a more concretely articulated definition, and I know, Sharon, you're going to bring up here, is that BAR would have no objection to change, to revise and or amend in our proposal, provided so long as it does in fact allow for a higher density through cluster subdivision than it does for large lot subdivision.
I'll just
Yeah.
interject in there. It's not our job, but okay.
BAR would also respectfully disagree with the characterization that this change would allow for a potentially limitless number of lots to be created. In and of itself, it would not, as minimum lot sizes would still remain for both large lot subdivisions and cluster subdivisions, and that is going to put an implicit cap on density. And
If
even
you would have gotten your way on 6, it would be gone.
well,
Sharon's
yes.
correct. If you
Absolutely.
intervene both of those text amendments, they both impact
yes,
each
and
other.
you'll
So,
be glad
yes.
to know that I thought about that as well. And even if it should be approved, even if this were approved and 2406 were approved, there still wouldn't be an infinite subdivision of parcels. We're not going to have the loaves and fishes of lots. Simply because, as was noted, all the other existing code requirements and market realities as well are going to ensure a check on how small lots can become. With those points addressed, I would like to turn to the question of consistency with the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. For reasons stated above, BAR argues that this change would in fact make the zoning ordinance more consistent. The NC zone maximum density calculation is an aberrant outlier relative to all the other density calculations. Removing it will improve code consistency rather than reducing it. And as stated before, if necessary for a positive recommendation, BAR is not imposed to implementing a calculation, provided it does in fact allow for higher density for cluster than large lot subdivision. Also, as noted in our testimony on 2406, a great many county residents do live in communities created before the adoption of this restriction, and the existing densities reflect in that reality. So undoing this change from 20 years ago will better further the stated goal of the NC zone than maintaining it would, and ensure any such development activity is more likely to be consistent with those communities. As relates to the comprehensive plan, BAR would like to point once again to the goals, strategies, and recommendations of the housing chapter. Given how much we've covered them in our previous 2 statements, and in the interest of time, we won't rehash them in particular, but would simply note, changing the code so it no longer favors larger lots over smaller ones would furthers the goal of both affordability/availability and promoting infill development. We would respectfully ask for your positive recommendation on this amendment.
Okay, public comment. Mr. Falstad.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Jay Falstad, Queen Anne's Conservation Association. Again, just to reiterate some of my earlier comments, we have concerns with 2407. Many of those concerns are outlined in the staff report. We would recommend an unfavorable recommendation due to inconsistencies with the comp plan. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Kathy, you have any comments?
No comment, Madam Chair.
Okay. Can I get a recommendation?
Madam Chair, I would like to make a
Not
motion.
a reservation.
Not a reservation, right. However, before doing so, I'd like to express my appreciation for Mr. Waterman's clear research and presentation for today. Clearly passionate about this. Please don't let these recommendations, unfavorable as they may be, hinder your progress and engagement in this. And I gratefully appreciate your looking out for the county in the long range.
Thank you. And like I said, our big part of this was to try and jumpstart the discussion around these issues.
We're jumping.
You started.
That said, resolved that the Planning Commission make an unfavorable recommendation to the County Commissioners regarding citizen-sponsored text amendment 2407, Bay Area Association of Realtors, care of Kevin Waterman, 181-19D, neighborhood conservation NC district residential density intensity requirements to repeal the maximum residential density calculation within the neighborhood conservation district to allow for greater density through subdivision, and offer the following findings. Through the proposed amendment, it is not clear how the residential density would be calculated. If it is applicable, is a calculation not required, or due to the fact that it is entirely removed, can lots in the NC district even be subdivided? Density standards indicates the number of potential lots that can be created. By removing it, there's potential for an endless number of lots to be created. Doing so in one zoning district would create inconsistency in the character and purpose among these districts. The existing standards are required to establish consistency within the existing residential neighborhoods of the NC district and allow for preserving the character, density, and scale of existing neighborhoods. And finally, believe it to be inconsistent with the 2022 comprehensive plan.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed, then so be it. It's an unfavorable.
Kevin, you should have been a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, too many lawyers, not enough jobs for them these days.
Any public comments? Nope. So I will request my next,
I just make sure you didn't have to write everything down.
Yep, thank you.
and my favorite recommendation.
I move we adjourn for today.
Do I have a second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Enjoy Key West. Thank you for being here.
Yes.